afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are joining us from in the world today. We are so happy to have you with us for another fabulous Power to Fly Chat and Learn event. Now, my name's Meg Alexander. I'm so happy to meet all of you. But before we dive in, I just want to go over a couple of little housekeeping items just to make sure that this event, like all of our virtual events, is a fabulous experience for everyone involved. So what you need to know, especially if this might be your first Power to Fly event, or maybe you haven't joined us in a while, is that your participation is key. We want to make sure that you have the ability to participate whatever way you would like. So you can do that in a couple different ways. If you would like, you can turn your cameras on and share your smiling, maskless faces with us safely today. If you have any kind of privacy concerns or just don't feel comfortable, that is completely fine, y'all. No need to be Instagram perfect. Do not share anything you want to share. Just know that myself and my 4-day dry shampoo messy bun welcome you no matter where you are coming from. Okay. I don't care if you are at a kitchen table, if you are at an ironing board in the basement, if you have furry coworkers looking over your shoulders, whatever you got, bring it. We love to meet you where you are. So if you do want to participate in any stronger capacity, you can always add any questions or comments that you might have for our speaker into the Zoom box, or sorry, the Zoom chat feature, and you'll find that in your Zoom toolbar. Now, today's session is being recorded. So what that means for you is that you get to kind of sit back, just chill and listen, all right? You don't have to take notes. You don't have to worry if you missed the second to last resource that someone named. You can always come back and review these, this chat and the recordings later on. Now, what that means is that if somebody, let's say that Bosky says something today that is just so like mind-blowing, you cannot wait to share it with a friend or a relative or a coworker. You don't have to. So everybody that's registered for today's session is going to get an email from Power to Fly in about 1 to 2 business days, and it'll have a link to where you can rewatch this video on our website when it's posted there. But like I said, we are live streaming to our YouTube account. So what that means is within about 5 to 15 minutes of the end of the live stream, you can head over to our YouTube channel and share this chat wherever you like. You can also search our entire library of recorded chats on our own website, or there's a huge selection of our archive stored on our YouTube library as well. Now, if you do have a question, again, please feel free, throw those into the group chat. If you have thoughts on what we're discussing, maybe your lived experience with a question is different than what we're talking about, let us know. Share early, share often. I want to make sure that the time that you spend with Power to Fly is well worth it. So tell me what you want to know so I can get you the answers you want. Now, we are at Power to Fly on 5 different social media channels. We are on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. And if you follow us or subscribe to us on any of those various platforms, awesome. We want to encourage it. Just know that if you would like to, you are welcome to take photos or video as we go to share out with the rest of your social media community. Let people know that you are learning with us. Anything that we can do to spread awareness and access to these resources, we are always in favor of. So thank you so much for spreading the word. We would love to retweet, repost, or reshare anything you'd like. So please feel free to tag us. Now, I'm very excited to introduce you to our speaker today. So Bosky Mukherjee is the founder of PMDojo, which is a platform to make a career in tech more accessible and inclusive for all. Now, Bosky leads a unique 10-week apprenticeship style program called Product Accelerator, and that helps product and tech enthusiasts gain practical skills and launch a real product with real impact for long-lasting mentorship relationships and to help you confidently break into tech. Bosky, I actually have heard of PMDojo, even though I have nothing to do with the tech field. And so when I was able to tell people I was talking to you today, they were very impressed, as well they should be. So is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience today? Anything you think they should know before we dive into questions?
No, you've covered it all. I am sorry for being a few minutes late, so that's totally my bad. I'm also a mother to a 7-year-old who's turning 8 this Friday. I have a dog. I live in Canada. I've lived in 8 or 9 different countries so far.
Cool.
I've been in tech all my life, so over 2 decades. Often being the only in the room, whatever that only is. And what else? No, I think that's it. being diagnosed with PTSD and all of those things and terrible mental health challenges a few years ago, as well as happy to talk about stress and how do you navigate or go through some of those things that really pull you down in life, and then how do you take those next steps. Happy to chat. Really depends on how these conversations go, and I'm extremely thankful to my favorite community, Power to Fly, for having me back.
Always. Thank you so much, Bosky, and thank you for sharing that with us. It is one of those things that's very important, but can be very hard to be vulnerable with people. So thank you for sharing those things with us today. All right. So last thing we're going to talk about before we dive into questions, these are some of the main takeaways you can expect to get today. Now, just keep in mind that if you took time out of your day to be here with us live, you get, kind of prime treatment. You get to, be here and ask questions and direct the conversation if you would like to. So please understand, these are some of the things we're going to try and get to, but if you have questions, ask them. Otherwise, we can't get you the answers you want. So we're going to try and talk about some of the misconceptions that most candidates fall prey to and how you can avoid those. We're going to discuss what really people are saying by non-traditional background, what that can actually look like. And then we're going to discuss some of the do's and don'ts when transitioning into a product role. All right, so Bosky, to kick us off here, let me stop sharing my screen so we can, spotlight our amazing talent here. There we go. So I want to talk about the first things somebody should do if they are a newbie and they want to get into this field. What do you think is the first thing people should be thinking of, or the first thing they should be ready to do?
Absolutely. I'm assuming here, newbie could mean a couple of different things. It could mean you're very early in your career, you have no idea, and you're interested in moving or transitioning into a product role. Or you could be someone with years of experience in some field, but you're looking to transition. So that's what I mean by newbie. Or maybe you are someone who is just gotten their first product role, but has no idea how you're going to be growing that role. So we can kind of look into different angles. I'm sure you've heard this one thing before, and that is truly understanding and being able to articulate, I think, our why, as to why we want to get into a product role. I didn't understand the gravity of this question until I sat on the other side of the table, hiring people and interviewing people. I thought my responses used to be great, right? I used to talk about making customer impact, working with the business and the tech and all of those things. And I thought I was nailing those questions until I sat on the other side of the table and heard over and over and over again every single candidate answering those same way. So I think we all have our why. It could be a story or something that happened early on in our life, or maybe some observation or some realization that we developed over the course of our adult lifehood that really translates into that powerful why, that unique why, and that story that we have as to why we're interested in the field. I think that is really important. So that's one. I think the second thing is that there's a lot of glamour associated when it comes to working in a product role, tech in general. It is an extremely high stake and an extremely hard role. And so it is very, very important to understand what is behind all of that glamour, right? And, we all have our reasons to either get into tech or continue in tech. There's money, there's prestige, there is the kind of work, there is the kind of opportunities that open up for you. You don't have to remain in product to retire. I kept on getting promotions and ended up being promoted as the president of the company. So it was way beyond even a product role. But it is really important to understand what happens on a day-to-day level that are not so the glamorous things, right? And then ask yourself if those are the right reasons for you to be making that move or trying to get into that role. Because it's not just important to get the job, you have to also thrive and not just burn out or just start disliking, right? So that is there. I think, the third thing would be, again, a really big reflection on what are your skills, your experiences, and gaps. We all have gaps. We will always have gaps, no matter how senior, how high up we climb the ladder. And we will always have to compete with someone who's done it numerous times. even as a VP of product, you will still be competing with someone who's been a VP of product for X years more than you. So that's just relative. But it's really important to understand those gaps and really figure out what do we need to do to smartly fill those gaps, right? And sometimes I think swimming against the tide is a very, 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 very smart strategy, and not doing the same thing that everybody is doing. I don't know if that made sense. Happy to kind of elaborate on certain things if it doesn't make sense.
No, I think that's a really good point. I think that it's one of those questions where everybody's going to have different answers, right? No matter what, it doesn't matter what background you come from or what path you took to get there. Everybody is going to have different answers of what you should start with, right? And I think honestly, the first one that you said that was really like held a lot of weight for me was to look behind the glamour of the role, right? Because I feel like I've experienced this kind of both ways, where there's certain jobs that I fell in love with after I started doing them, because I was like, oh my God, I didn't know this was this cool. I didn't know I could do blah, blah, blah. But you're right. It is also very, very difficult to not fall in love with the facade of something as opposed to the reality of it. So I love that. I think that's a very, very good point to make of, really look at what the job entails and make sure that that's what you like doing, not just the office or the parking space or the cool fancy desk. Make sure it's the stuff that happens there that you are also going to enjoy doing.
Absolutely. And I think if I may just add,
yeah, please.
The roles in product, a lot of people, I think when they're looking to get into a product role, I think we get so hung up on the particular title, the job title. The thing is that because the product function, it's a relatively new field. It's been about 10 years, 12 years before that. It wasn't even there in existence. Even if people were working in some shape or capacity, it was not called. And the role is continuing to evolve, right? It's a very, very multidisciplinary field. And if companies don't have dedicated roles for, whether it's a product manager, a designer, a researcher, someone else in the company will be doing aspects of it, or multiple people will be doing for it. So I find that a lot of people get so hung up with the title, and what is really important to understand is different companies will call it different things. What a particular product role will look in a startup will look very different in a larger company. Startups are also very different sizes, different stages. Mid-sized company will look very different. And sometimes, there are so many roles within tech and product that do not necessarily just fit a designer or a product manager. I mean, there are 4 or 5 different roles within design function. There are 4, 5, 6, 7 different roles within product. And so it's really important to, I think, be aware and discover what that passion is and what are some of the things that you will really enjoy and be good at, as opposed to saying, I want to become a product manager, because everybody is becoming a product manager.
No, I think that's wonderful. So, all right, so let's talk about what job hunting looks like within the product industry. Are there different, is it any way different than what, job search somebody might have been doing outside of that field? What should people kind of take into consideration when they're trying to find and apply for roles within product?
I think the basic job search process doesn't quite change, right? You of course, try to shortlist companies, then you come up with a resume, you're kind of working on a dedicated resume per role, you're tweaking it. I think in general, you acknowledge and send a thank you note. Again, I might be old school, but I think some of these things are important, because at the end of the day, it's not a robot who's hiring you. At the end of the day, it is another human being. And it's, I think that's where I say that I'm old, lots of gray hair, I'm old school. And I think that power of relationships and people is really, really important. And I hadn't learned that until much later in my career, but it's really, your social capital is huge. But I think in product, what makes it different than some of the other roles in tech is the fact that it is very, very competitive. And the barriers to enter this field is quite high, right? Even though it is one of those roles where it shouldn't be high, right? Most of the product roles are generalist roles, But I think the sheer competitiveness makes it really high. Of course, the job descriptions don't do justice because even entry level roles will ask for experience. But I think some of the things that I've observed, some of the things that I've seen happen time and time again with our fellows in PMDojo, some of the things that I've seen as a hiring manager is just, we really need to, I think, understand the pain points of the hiring managers. It's really important to understand, if you think about it, they are scanning through, for companies that don't have an ATS, you still have a human being who's doing it. They are probably scanning through 200, 300, 400 resumes. I've certainly done it. I still do that for a lot of companies that I'm advising. I'm spending maybe 15, 20 seconds a lot of the times. And so if I'm just spending 15, 20 seconds, you have to stand out. And given that there are so many resources on how we need to work out our resume, right? 2-page, 1-page, bullet points, accomplishments, less busy formatting. At the end of the day, when I'm scanning through these resumes, most resumes look very similar. So it's, again, going back to asking yourself, well, how are you going to stand out? What are those one or two things? Maybe it is a volunteering, maybe it is, an award that you received, maybe it is a community work that you did. A lot of those things that show that uniqueness of how you might be different. I think that is the piece. At the end of the day, the job that product people do, it is about making sure that their product experience is distinct compared to everything else in the market. It's the same thing what you have to do with yourself. You are the product. Sounds terrible, but at the end of the day, you are the product, and you have to stand out, and you have to build those personal moats that compound over time and really separate you out from everybody else. Because one thing that you really have to understand is that you're not just competing against other people like yourself who's trying to make that transition happen for the first time. You're also competing against folks who've already been in the role for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. They're still considered junior, intermediate at that level. And so how do you build that experience? The second thing I would say is that rather than filling your resume with all kinds of certifications, and I can share a resource, a blog that I had published on certifications and product, it's really important to, I think, figure out what is that biggest blocker for you. If the biggest blocker is you don't have experience in a product role and you're running into that challenge every single time, it doesn't matter how much money you spend, it doesn't matter how many certifications you do, it'll never fill that lack of experience gap. So that's where I think it's really about being smart. And so figure out the different ways that you can build that experience without getting the job, because that is the chicken and egg problem, right? I think the other thing is a lot of jobs and product get filled without the formal, I'm going to be submitting resume. Surprisingly, the product world is very small. Most of us know someone, so that bubble is really, really small and seems to be becoming smaller. And we all start with zero network, right? We all start there. But it is not to forget the power of relationships, right? And your relationship does not equal to how many contacts you have on LinkedIn. It is really equal to how many people are there, let's say LinkedIn, that you can genuinely reach out to and get some advice and have that one-on-one kind of a relationship. So really reaching out there and finding out, how you can actually leverage that. And again, find opportunities, those hidden opportunities that exist, and never to forget to start. This is a hard one because it also relates with imposter syndrome. So I think we're touching a lot of different things, but it is about showing up and marketing yourself. Again, something that people in product have to do for the products, if otherwise your product, you can build a coolest feature or the coolest product, but if your users don't know about it, no one's going to use it. So the same way, you have to market yourself. And by that, I don't mean in the wrong way, just going on and just, I'm not asking you to start dancing on TikTok, but in a product role, we are required to have a point of view, a strong point of view, but loosely held. And so you need to demonstrate that point of view online so that people within the community, hiring managers and companies start getting a glimpse in how you think, how do you develop that point of view? Are you rigid? Are you stubborn? Or are you someone who is learning and unlearning? And would you be someone who would be a good fit in the team? So yeah.
Good. Ooh, loving your responses here. All right. So one of the things that you touched on early on, was about like you can learn all of these various skills or all these different languages. What skills should people take into consideration when they're applying for roles in product?
So there are so many different roles, right? Within PM, there is product manager, product ops, technical PM. If you already have a technical background, and then forget design, right? Even design, you have like content designer, you have UX designer, UI designer, service designer, copy designer, UI developer, and then you have research, right? So there's so many different roles. And not to forget, you even have customer success and product marketing and all of these, right? So if you have a technical background already, know that what you were doing in that technical role and capacity is not what is going to be used in a product role. The understanding and the conceptual understanding is going to help. But in that case, a lot of those human skills are going to be very important. And I'll start listing some of the human skills that is important for everyone, regardless of whether you have a tech background or not. And then a lot of the people who come from non-technical background, there is a lot of this, I call it snake oil, because these are just these massive lies that have become so common that we all start believing that they are truths as opposed to just fiction or myths. And so I just call them as snake oil. They just, are everywhere. But there are so many roles, even as a product manager, where you don't need a technical background. So for example, if your product is not highly technical, for example, DevOps, your target users are not developers or engineers, IoT, maybe, some of these very, very technical kind of platforms and products, you don't necessarily need a technical background, right? So in that case, again, those human skills are really important. But I think at a high level, passion for understanding how software gets built, I think that is a very important. Ooh, oh, sorry. My earphones just fell. Boy.
Oh, you're all right. I almost dropped my fidget toy the other day. So I am right there with you. I have like a lineup so that if I do drop them, I don't have to bend over to pick them.
Oh man. Where was I? So yeah, I think understanding conceptually of how software gets built, that is important. And for that, you don't need to understand how code gets written, but just how software gets built at a very, very high level. What is that we see in the screen? What happens behind? How is the data moving? Like very simple, right? So that's like conceptual understanding of how software gets built. I think general passion for technology, if we are looking at tech side of things, but without getting so hung up to say, I want to become a machine learning PM, or I want to be a Web3 PM. These are all technologies, and every passing day there's going to be another flavor. Really, it is about understanding what is happening in the tech space. I think that is important. But I'll talk more so about, I guess, the human skills that are really needed. So high agency, that is a very, very core skill. All the theory that we all read make it sound like it's a bed of roses, right? You're going to do X, you're going to do Y, then you're going to look at the data, then you're going to move ahead. Rarely does it happen in the real world. In the real world, you're working with people, different agendas, not necessarily bad or, in a mean way. There are just different priorities and different agendas that we all have. Sales has different things that they need to achieve. Marketing has something different. Your C-level has something different. And whether you're a designer, researcher, or PM, you are you find yourself in the middle of all of this tension while you're dealing with a changing market, global pandemics, war, and all of those things. And you have to kind of figure out, what you have to do. And so that's where that high agency skill is really helpful. Doesn't matter what challenges you face, it is about thinking outside of those frameworks and templates and checklists and really figuring out, I can figure out this problem. right? So I think that skill is really important, high agency. I think the second skill that really helps, not just to get, I think these human skills are not just needed to get your first break, but it's also needed to climb up the ladder, whatever that ladder looks for you, right? Whether it's people management track, whether it's an individual contributor track, whatever that looks like. Because at the end of the day, we work with people. And I think that's where the entire messiness comes in, which is why frameworks don't help, really doesn't help. No one sings Kumbaya after filling the framework. It doesn't happen. Hasn't happened in my 2 decades of work. I think the second thing would be the resiliency. By that, I mean, we hear this resilience and grit a lot, right? But you're going to have failures. You're going to have ideas, you're going to have hypotheses that you strongly believe that that is the right thing to do. And maybe, you have even backed it up with all of the data and everything. And then you go and present it to your leadership team or your teams, and you are going to realize that, boy, that doesn't work, and so, or maybe you have launched a feature and you've done everything that you had to do, tested and validated and did everything that you had to do. And your customers start complaining. It happened with me. It took less than a minute for all the customers to start complaining after the rollout of a feature within 3 months of me joining as a director of product. And the rest of the day we had to spend in rolling back the functionality, right? Something that the teams worked for 3-4 months, massive failure. So I think resiliency is about reflecting on what happened, learning from it, and then bouncing back. And you're going to get tons of failures, tons. So that's the second skill. I think the third, there are lots of these human skills, survival skills that I call, but I think the third one that is really important, I think for me, is the storytelling piece. It's really, really important. I cannot emphasize it enough. We had our kickoff session today in PMDojo for our fall cohort. And everyone had data points and all of that as they were pitching their problems. But it's not just about, again, it's not a checklist. You have to be able to tell a story so that you can grip and hook the audience. It's how you tell it. So, how do you communicate that story? How do you change the story while the plot remains the same? But how do you change the story when you're communicating to your engineers, or you're communicating to your cross-functional team, you're communicating to your manager, or you're communicating to the C-level? The story will change even though the plot is going to remain the same. So I think that is super important. And then, I can share a blog that I've written, hopefully that can actually give some more of those other skills.
Yeah, please do. I'm also sharing a link with y'all in the chat thread. I saw I had a couple DMs as well as a couple people that messaged in the chat talking about how they need to work on storytelling. So I did a quick platform search for y'all. There's a link in there that'll take you to our archives. So I did a quick search for anything that we had that was about storytelling. There's some really, really great information there and really amazing speakers to learn from. So definitely check those out. But Bosky, any links that you got that you want sent, feel free, send them away wherever you'd like. I'll gather them all and we can make sure they get attached to this recording when it's posted.
Awesome.
But yeah, I mean, like there's a lot of people in here saying, they really need to practice their storytelling. And I think it's one of those things that like, it makes a ton of sense, right? Because like I'm 36, telling your story was not a thing that was at all talked about even 10 years ago. It just wasn't. Nobody talked about it. And when you think about it in what it actually means, and not just like of the buzzword of like storytelling, it's communication, right? You're trying to be more effective in your communication of telling someone, hey, this is where I'm coming from and why I think I can do a great job for your org.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're 100% right. And I'll maybe give an example in the world of product, what that storytelling may look like, right? We see this a lot in PMDojo. I've done this myself a number of times, and it took someone in my team who was my advocate or ally to call me aside and really kind of work through. And also I think experimenting and testing what works, because we all have our personalities. We cannot pretend to be someone else. I'm a really, really big introvert. The way I tell story and the way I use my hands is going to be very different than my peer or my CEO who would climb up on the table and get all animated. Very different, right? And everyone's storytelling is unique. It also depends on, I guess, the audience and what do they like, right? At the end of the day. So it's like, we are all actors in the stage. It's William Shakespeare. So I'll give an example. Let's say you have to talk about, the customer journey. What is the journey that your customers take when they are trying to solve that particular pain point that you're trying to solve? Maybe as a designer, maybe as a product manager. One kind of storytelling or lack of would be that you basically put a customer journey map on your PowerPoint presentation, Canva, whatever it is, and you basically explain all those different columns, right? So that is one way, and you're going to typically find that if you do that, your target audience will start getting boring. It is a very busy slide, lots of stuff, no one's going to follow. So that's one, but it's not storytelling. But let's say the other slide, you don't even have all of that information. You do progressive kind of showing the information, but instead of putting that template for customer journey map, you basically take them on a journey of Chloe, the stressed out mother. And you say, okay, let's meet Chloe. She is a mother of 2. She is a single mom and she works 2 jobs. This is how she starts in the morning. She has to feed the baby, change the diaper, whatever that is. I know I've mixed it up now because a 2-year-old is probably not going to need diapers, but you kind of start talking about the day in the life. And then you just bring in those key elements, right? So instead of reading out your slide that has a template, which completely confuses, you basically start almost helping your audience picture Chloe, the stressed out mother, of what their pain points are. And that is the difference between, showing a template and fill in the blanks and actually telling a story in the world of product. And that's just one example.
I love that. No, I think that's wonderful. And it very much kind of put me in the same mind as people who get a chance to maybe like pitch their script as opposed to just like sending it in somewhere. What you talk to somebody about like what you're turning in is going to be completely different than what you would like maybe write on a note that you stuck on the top of it to hand to somebody. So yeah, like in that way, you can even see how your storytelling is going to change depending on the method of that communication, the audience, all of that kind of stuff. Love that. All right, so let's talk about some of the common misconceptions that happen to people who are candidates for roles in product. What are some of the most common misconceptions that they might fall prey to?
The snake oil.
Yes, I want to know
it. Okay, so this is my not my favorite, my least favorite, but it is so common, almost on a daily basis. In some product group, some product community, there's going to be a question that comes like, I am looking to transition or I'm trying to interview. What certification or bootcamp can I do so that my profile is considered favorably by hiring managers? So, and I can tell you that as hiring managers, we don't look at certifications or bootcamps. They really don't mean a thing. You get lots of free certifications these days. You can also get a certificate if you just write a good review for a particular program. So at the end of the day, they're kind of meaningless, right? The information and knowledge has become so much more accessible. Like back when I started, there wasn't anything, no book, nothing, and I was so close to being fired so many times because it was like trying to figure it out on the job and not even knowing the vocabulary or the language. We have a very different problem now. We are overwhelmed with so many opinions and information. So it's again, what I wanted to share is that do not rely on certifications and boot camps as your golden ticket to make the transition happen. Also know that hiring managers are not looking at that. Their lens is, have you done the job? Because if you think about it, you're competing against people who already have done the job. And so if you want to stand out and have a fair chance to compete aside people who already have that experience, you want everything to demonstrate and tell the company that either you've done the job before or you've done aspects of it. And so that you want to be considered, right? The second snake oil that I would say is that in product management, there is no industry recognized certificate. So that's the other snake oil. I think a lot of people might come across programs or courses or certificates that say it is the gold standard, it is an industry recognized certificate. Unlike project management, where you have PMP, which is a certificate that is issued by PMBOK, there is no equivalent in product. Product management hasn't been codified because it is an art, and it looks very different in different companies, and context is super important, and it's a multidisciplinary field. You have entrepreneurship, design, research, business, everything kind of coming together, while also a whole bunch of human skills. So second snake oil is there is no certificate, industry recognized certificate, so let's just stop chasing that. I would say the third one, there is a lot of, I think, candidates believe that in order to get into a PM role, they really have to make sure, especially product managers, that you have to understand and learn how to ship, how to write requirements, and how to learn Scrum, because that is what is going to make it or break it. And in the real world, how innovation happens in companies and how products get built and designed, it is very different. You can get a piece of code deployed if you're just focusing with your developers the whole time. And developers are super important, very, very important, but they're one part of the puzzle. In order to truly launch your product in the market and make sure that it makes that desired impact that everyone in the company is looking at, you have to think beyond just design development PM. You have to understand how to work with people within success and sales and marketing and C-level and finance and HR and all of those people. And so there's a lot of stuff that's happening outside. How do you influence? How do you pitch an idea and get your idea approved and bought in from the senior leaders? A lot of the times you may not have data to start with. Like every single article will tell you that you have to make data informed decisions. What do you do when you don't have any data? Do you just twiddle your thumb and wait? Do you recommend to your senior management, well, we need to spend 2 more months in research? That ain't gonna cut it. So what do you do when you have to make those decisions with confidence, but you don't have data? Pivot is such a cool buzzword. Everyone talks about pivots, pivot, but it's a very, very uncomfortable thing to do and guide your teams to be making those pivots. What does that look like? So I think it is building products is way more complicated and complex than just Scrum and writing requirements and working with development and design. It is truly a company-wide initiative, and we have to understand how to actually work and collaborate beyond. Developers and designers, super important piece, but they're not the only piece. And I think it is about getting that full stack experience and showing those full stack skills and experience than actually just showing that very myopic view of the role. I think the other snake oil, or just I think some of those myths and things like that that are floating around, is that in order to work in tech, you either have to be a designer or a product manager or a developer. That's it. And I think we were talking about it in the beginning as well. There's so many different roles that we have to start thinking beyond just these 3 generic titles, because for everyone's career transition, it might look so different. And sometimes you may have to make a milestone, like a milestone step in order to get to your goal. And sometimes you may discover that you don't even like a particular role. So it's really, really, really important to know all the different roles and career fields in product beyond just these 2 or 3 different titles.
Okay. So let's talk about the non-traditional background idea. All right. So obviously, non-traditional background can mean something different to different people. I feel like 10 years ago, non-traditional background generally meant somebody who hadn't been to college, which is just a terrible way to put that. And secondarily, makes college somehow the brass ring. And I can personally tell you, my degree is mint condition, never been used. Like, so when it comes to saying, like, trying to tell people, like, yeah, we accept people from a non-traditional background, or we're seeking applicants from a non-traditional background. What does that translate to within product? What is traditional, so that we can figure out what non-traditional means?
And that definition is going to keep on changing even as time goes by. Maybe we just walk through the narrative that's been over the last few years, right? So when product started becoming a more of a mainstream role and companies started hiring them, especially in some of the big tech companies, there was this requirement of having someone from these top tier universities hiring from the backyard. Wherever the company was, the big tech, you typically had a backyard university, an amazing top tier pedigree, university with pedigree. A lot of hiring tended to happen from there. And of course, if you're going to a top tier, we can conclude, or we can assume here, I wouldn't say conclude, we can assume here that most people would probably belong to a certain demographic, right? And so for me, a non-traditional background means a lot of different things. It could mean someone who doesn't have a very stereotypical background that typically tech companies seek to hire from. And, computer science degree could be one, MBA could be one. So these are all traditional backgrounds. Computer science, previous experience directly in a product role, someone who doesn't have gap years, so continuous employment. No mother has taken a mat leave, right? Like these would be our stereotypical, I guess, assumptions of what a traditional background would mean. Maybe someone who is the majority, so no one from the minority. Maybe someone who doesn't come from a neurodiverse background, so they don't have ADHD, or they're not on the spectrum, or any of these things. Maybe someone who's worked continuous jobs and not on contracts, or maybe not half-time roles that they've taken. So these are all the stereotypical definitions. For me, when I consider in a product or tech organization non-traditional background, I mean, we're basically breaking down all of those barriers, and we're opening up these roles for people who have those right aptitude that we were talking about, and who have that potential. But necessarily, we are not looking at whether someone has a college degree or not.
We have skill, not the package that it's wrapped in.
Absolutely. We had someone who hadn't been working in the so-called paying job for about 4 or 5 years, and didn't have a college degree. And, with when they were going through the PMDojo program, they actually joined as a product manager at a high-tech company, right? I mean, it's that. It could be a mother who thought that they were just going for a 12-week, 16-week mat leave. In the US, Canada could be 18 months, different countries, different things. But suddenly realize 7 years have passed by, and they have a different problem of returning back to work. We don't make it easy for them. That would be a non-traditional background. So for me, I think non-traditional background is just breaking down all of those barriers and really kind of looking after and seeking, I guess, the aptitude and the potential, versus kind of creating all of those high barrier requirements.
Yeah, like actually it's the idea of actually looking for the skills that are needed, as opposed to, well, they have to have gotten them in this specific way. You have to have come by the skills in a certain way. You have to be presenting your skills in a certain way. It's like, well, that's not how this all has to function.
No,
right.
absolutely.
So
and I think skills that you can also learn, right?
Yeah.
It is that neuroplasticity, right? Like, it's not just skills, but it's also potential to learn new ones, right?
Well, I like you were talking us through some skills earlier, and instead of calling them soft skills, which is also applicable, but I find it kind of pejorative sometimes, even though people don't mean it that way. But like, you referred to them as survival skills. They're a skill that you pick up by being a person who exists on the planet and has to talk to other people who also live on this planet. Like, this is how you get through life. And so I can't tell you how strongly I reacted positively when I heard you calling them survival skills, because like, I need them. I am barely surviving and I need them. So like, these are important things to know. We have a lot of questions from people in the chat wanting to know basically, like, so they really responded to you saying that, like, certificates and boot camps are fine, but nothing is like guaranteed this will get you in the door. So if you are coming from another field, let's say you're transitioning into product from someplace else, or you don't have the experience in the field you're trying to transition into, what do you suggest for entering into that new field? Like if it's not boot camps and certifications, what should people know if they're transitioning in?
Absolutely. So again, here we are assuming, starting my response here, or some of my ideas here. We're assuming here that these folks are already have reflected that this is a career path that they want to pursue, right? So that reflection piece has happened. So I think one thing is, you can always work on side projects, right? And the unfortunate thing of the world that we live in today is that there are more problems to solve than solutions. There are lots of problems. Education is broken, housing is broken, medicine is broken. I mean, everything seems to be broken in the world we live in. And so there's nothing stopping us to, look into the market and find a problem that has enough users who are experiencing it and solve it, right? There are tons of no-code platforms available as well. So you don't even have to learn how to code or find a developer. You can actually completely solve end-to-end. There is a caveat, though, that the side projects look very successful. Side projects or good side projects look very different for product people than, let's say, developers. The way they're getting evaluated is very different. As product people, we're not looking at, can you tinker with this tool? We're not looking at, can you use Figma? We're not looking at that, right? Tools come and go. No amount of, can I use this particular tool, is going to make you a great or a good product manager, designer, or researcher. At the end of the day, we get hired for how we think, how we approach. It's our problem solving skills. It's basically our brain, right? Which is why these roles have good pay and a very, very high pay. It's because you can't just automate these functions and run it like that. You cannot just rely on hiring interns forever. And, we need that experience and perspective, right? So it's the side project. So it's going to be very important to demonstrate that you can think through the problem and solve through the problem like a designer or like a PM or like a researcher, right? It also means that if you're going the side project route, you're not just filling in the blanks and using a checklist to go through. You really have to demonstrate all of those challenges that you came through. What did you do to unblock yourself? And typically, a lot of people, when they're working on side projects, it's usually an annoyance for you or it's annoyance for someone you know. At the end of the day, if it is a product, you're showing that product mindset, and that's what you need to demonstrate, because essentially that's what you're going to also be gauged for. You have to be able to show that it is not just a problem for you and your friends. It is a real problem in the market. So that is a very, very big difference, side projects. You can always join PMDojo. So that's like a shameless plug, because in PMDojo, you're learning, you're getting mentorship, but you're also working cross-functionally with each other to be solving a real problem. You also get matched up with real companies to solve their business problem and launch a product for them. So that's also there. The other thing that you could also do is, interview and have informational chats with other people who are working in these roles to familiarize yourself. Ideally, it would be great. I think a lot of people get so hung up on, okay, so I'm going to build a product or I'm going to work on a side project. What tools shall I use? Or what is the idea? Where can I get the idea from? And it's not so much the idea. It is about really spending some time to get the problem or the pain point that you're solving, as opposed to an idea. So don't go with the notion that I'm going to build an Airbnb for X or an Uber for X. Really think about the problem. What is that one pain point that if I don't solve that, nothing else will matter? And if I don't solve this X pain point for Y person or person type, that persona or that target user group, really it's not going to make a dent in the market, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm loving everything you're saying. I'm keeping my eyes on the chat too to see if everybody has last minute questions we want to talk about. We have 5 minutes left. I want to try and get to one more question. This person had asked, once you get your first role in product development, what do you do next?
When you say product development, are you talking about are you talking about like a engineering or a product role?
They didn't say. When I was looking at it, I kind of took the long view of like, once you get your first role within the product industry, then what do you do next from there, I think. But if this is your role, or if this is your question, you meant something else, let us know in the chat. I've got eyes on target.
There's so many things. One is, this is something that I think one of my mentors told me a long time ago. I have this tendency, and I think a lot of people have that, is that we need to know a lot of things because it can be very overwhelming. A product role is one of those only few roles in the market or in a company where your onboarding process is very intense, right? Like you just don't have to know how to do your job as a designer, researcher, or PM, but you also have to understand how sales works, how marketing works, what is happening in the industry, what's happening with the competitors, looking at the data. You also have to make sure you've learned how to use the product end to end. Like there's so many things. It's very difficult to learn everything on day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. And so it's also important to acknowledge that you're not going to know everything. And something that resonated with me, what one of my mentors said, was just in time learning. And that means that figure out what you need to learn now versus trying to learn everything, because that's how I used to be. I have to learn this, I have to learn that, I have to learn that, and not everything is needed just today. And so it is about figuring out what you need to learn today, and whether this is having conversations with your stakeholders. What are some of the things that I need to focus my learning on today or this week or for the next 2 weeks or for this month, and really trying to kind of prioritize your learning journey. So that's one. So that's something super important. I think the second thing that a lot of people, I think, do it as a checklist because everyone tells everyone to do that, and that is getting to know the people in your company. And so we all identify, these X number of people that we're going to have these 30, 40-minute or 15-minute casual chat, the meet and greets. And then we forget to do that on an ongoing basis. So it is about continuing that rhythm. And it is also then starting to map, because let's say your company has 200 people, or even if it has 20 people, you don't have to meet with all of those 20 people on a regular basis. Some are going to be more critical and some are not going to be. And so it's about not just doing it within your first few weeks, but also continuing to do it. The second thing is, I think, really being open to finding the landmines. There is politics. There will be politics. Comes back to, we're working with people, not robots. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the times we may not be able to see those landmines, especially in a virtual world. And so again, how can you have those conversations to know, where are those mines that, you need to kind of be aware of, so that you're not stepping on them. And perhaps you're also not letting some of your team members step on them, where they need to be avoided. So again, those. And then I think the fourth thing would be definitely create an alignment with your manager on what success might look like 30, 60, 90 days. And I think a lot of people wait for the company to come up with a 30, 60, 90-day plan. But again, this is that high agency skill, right? If you're not going to get handed down in your hands, build one and make sure that you're aligned with your manager on what that 30, 60, 90-day looks like. And it's not just about completing a particular deliverable, but trying to figure out what is that measure of success, either qualitative or quantitative, because otherwise it'll be very subjective. You'll feel you've done everything great, and according to your manager, you could have done just this thing better, and it never meets that mark. And so,
well, and ideally, if you're coming up with your own plan and your manager doesn't have one, you are that much closer to getting to follow your plan.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And maybe they do have one, but maybe you're like, but I have this one. Maybe we could inch a little bit closer to my plan. Like, these are not, I'm loving all of this advice you're giving people. We have less than a minute left. I hate cutting you off because I love everything that's coming out of your mouth right now. But I just want to say a huge thank you, Bosky, for taking time out of your day to be here with us. We always enjoy spending time with you. But thank you so much. This has been absolutely wonderful. I'm so happy to have gotten to host today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. And feel free to connect, with me on LinkedIn. Just mention that we met at this event. Happy to connect. And yeah, all the best to everyone. And it's always pleasure and humbling to be part of Power to Fly.
Oh, thank you so much, Bosky. Huge thank you as well to our audience. Y'all have kept the chat hopping. I was absolutely rolling at some of the comments. Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who took time out of your day to be here with us live. I'm absolutely ever so grateful that y'all give me a job. So thank you so much for that. We have some amazing chats coming up the rest of this week and well into next week. So if you have, if this is one of your first Power to Fly events, I hope it won't be your last. If this was your 100th Power to Fly event, thank you so much for coming back again. We love seeing familiar faces. I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of their Monday. Happy, healthy, safety, all that good stuff, guys. And we will see you back here